We are already enjoying warmer temperatures. People are starting to enjoy themselves outside and doing things outdoors. And we got a question regarding mosquitoes, which is an issue for a lot of us, especially I live in the South, so we have that problem earlier than other folks in the country. And the question is about does blowing bubbles or having a bubble blowing machine or a gun or whatever actually help keep the mosquitoes away? Is there any level of truth to this?
Well, with anything, there's always sort of a kernel of truth. But this is one of those urban legends that's been around for a long, long time. It comes up around this time every year, in fact, because as you say, people are starting to go outside and enjoy themselves. And with the relatively mild winter that parts of the US experienced this year, mosquitoes were active earlier this year as well. I think I heard the first report of a mosquito was like in February, which is very, very early. So is there any truth? To be honest with you, there is not really any empirical evidence to support the notion that bubbles in and of themselves would have any impact on whether or not mosquitoes would be coming around. That's you see the same thing with other flies. The idea of hanging bags of water with a penny in it drives away house flies. Again, there's very little evidence that that is true. And so with the blowing bubbles thing, it's the same kind of thing. There's lots of aspects to that, but there's no particular reason why bubbles of any kind would have a particular impact on mosquitoes, other than if they were coming out in really large numbers, the bubbles. Mosquitoes aren't great flyers, and so they could bump into them if you have a lot of bubbles. But a lot of bubbles can also be disruptive to socializing if you get a little too crazy with it. But of course, the bubbles are typically produced by creating some sort of a soapy mixture and then combining that with some sort of blower to create the bubbles. So the notion of using a gun or one of the little bubble, the dip in the bottle and then blow through it, really there's there's little evidence to support that that's going to do anything other than make bubbles. It's not going to impact the number of mosquitoes at all. Now, there is an aspect of some of the larger bubble makers that might have an impact on whether mosquitoes are hanging around, and that depends on its size. So if you get one that has a lot of air current, it has a fan attachment, and that's what's generating it. Mosquitoes don't like flying in wind. They're not very good at it, and so that has been shown to sometimes reduce the number of mosquitoes in a particular area. But you could accomplish the same thing without the bubbles just by putting up fans around the area that you want to be socializing in. You could accomplish the same thing without throwing soapy water everywhere. So that part potentially could be true. One of the things though that I often want to caution people on is chasing after these sort of urban legends or old time remedies without seeing whether or not there's any actual scientific evidence to support it. And one of the things in this case is depending on which soap is being used and what components are in it, because often they'll add things to the soapy mixture to make it smell good, right? So it's pleasant to be around. Well, if those happen to have floral notes, one of the things that most people don't realize is, first off, not all mosquitoes feed on humans. Of the ones that feed on humans, only females feed on humans. And in all of those species that feed on humans, they start off drinking nectar from flowers. So if you have soapy mixtures that have a higher concentration of floral notes early in the year, you actually might attract them because they're coming and looking for a food, because they don't actually switch to drinking blood, the females, till they need to start making eggs. So we've seen this sort of controversial thing come up before, and it was always sort of dose dependent. If you have really high concentrations of smelly, fluids, that can have an impact on whether or not mosquitoes are attracted or repelled to it. The specific concentrations, that varies the profile of the mixture, and that can have an impact on whether or not it's effective, whether or not it's landing on people, because people are what mosquitoes are queuing in on, right? So they're flying around looking for food. They find us through carbon dioxide, a combination of carbon dioxide and our normal body smells, odors. And I don't mean like just the bad kind. We have a natural odor on our skin that they use to cue in on, and that is affected by those compounds as well. If you get a whole bunch of this bubble mixture on you, and you happen to be already predisposed to being attractive to mosquitoes, you could actually make things worse. But there's lots of other things that people can turn to. There's over-the-counter mosquito control things. Citronella, it has variable efficacy. A lot of people know about it, but what they don't realize is citronella isn't just citronella, right? Citronella has every version and formulation is slightly different. And so those different formulations are going to end up with a different impact on the mosquitoes in your local area. So some will work and some won't work, and some they'll completely ignore. But there are other things. Any of the off-brand sprays that you can put on will make you less attractive to mosquitoes. And as I said, one easy solution that, especially if we're going to have a really warm summer, would be good anyway, is set up big fans to circulate air so that they're less inclined to come into that space.
Floyd, I wanted to ask you, and that was incredibly helpful, and it's especially understanding the behavior of the mosquitoes and what makes them drawn into the space where we are. I had an issue with fruit flies a couple of years ago in an apartment that I was living in, and while I was researching on how to avoid them or kill them or get them, I bumped into soap traps. So it was basically, I believe it was red wine with dish soap, something like that. And I was like, okay, I don't remember if it worked or not. Some of them did fall into the trap, but it made me think, why is this soap mixture work? And will it be the same notion for mosquitoes?
So unfortunately, no. So one of the things, so just to clarify, using soapy mixture is actually a collecting technique that even scientists here at the museum use. But it's not that the insects are attracted to soapy water. It's always done in combination with another chemical that they are attracted to, or colors. So using colored bowls with soapy water will attract different profiles of insects. Some will be attracted to yellows, to reds, to blues. And so you can actually sort of do community sampling that way, but they're not actually attracted to the soapy water itself. In the case that you just described, it was combined with red wine and vinegar. As red wine ages, it becomes attractive to fruit flies. And so they're smelling the wine, and when they land on the water, rather than staying on the surface, the soapy water causes them to sink into it. And so the soapy water is often used for that very reason. Insects, if they just land on water, won't break the surface tension. Soapy water changes that and they drown. And so there are a number of traps that are used to collect insects, especially pest insects, that do rely on soapy water, but it's not because they're attracted to the soapy water. They're attracted to something being combined with the soapy water, and the soapy water is just what's killing them.
And it's definitely not the most effective thing to try on mosquitoes, and you'll have to have tons of them.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and I would not imagine. And actually, there's some evidence that if a female mosquito doesn't drown when she lands in a pan trap, she can lay eggs, and her larvae can develop in the soapy water. And so you could actually make matters worse by providing a breeding ground for the mosquitoes if you don't design it just right. So it's much better to go with techniques and methods that we know are effective when it comes to mosquitoes and other potential vectors of diseases. So
what can we do besides having large fans and using bug repellent to have a less annoying interaction with mosquitoes?
So there is some, you know, there's lots of other animals that readily eat mosquitoes but don't cause a problem for us. So one of the most common ones is setting up martin houses. These are birds that specifically feed on mosquitoes. Bat houses, many bat species also feed on mosquitoes, and so you can encourage natural predators of the mosquitoes, both the adults, the flying adults, as well as those in the water. And that will give you a much better sort of long-term control strategy. You know, a lot of people throw like insecticidal discs into water, but you're trying to balance. You don't want to like decimate the ecosystem if the mosquitoes are sort of the base of the food chain. So you don't want to wipe them out entirely, but you can add predators like mosquito fish, for instance, little gambusia, to the same water. You get good control, but they don't wipe out the entire population, and it makes a much more pleasant sort of space. There's also other things that you can use, essential oils, if you're worried about sprays. But again, it's really important to make sure that the mixture is right and effective, because not all of them are made the same. And so you want to make sure that you've sort of tested it with your own sort of odor profile to make sure that you're not making matters worse rather than better for your outdoor activities.
Thank you so much, Floyd. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you think it's important for our audiences to know or to understand?
No, I think we've covered most everything. It's just important to not be afraid to get outside. There are really easy ways of dealing with mosquitoes, but there are also a lot of companies out there selling devices, electronic devices, you know, a variety of sort of chemical odorants in a variety of different forms. And once again, not all are going to be effective. And so you want to make sure that you've tried it out before you have a big barbecue to make sure that you're getting good coverage of the area where you're wanting to socialize outside. But it's going to be a great summer. And just remember that mosquitoes are part of the ecosystem. So you don't want to just kill everything, because you impact everything else.